Today we'll be talking about the Common Application Essay. So for context, the Common Application Essay, maybe a good place to start is what is the Common App? So the Common App is an application that's shared by more than 800 colleges. And it's actually used by most top 50 colleges, right? Basically, it's a unified application system where you fill out stuff like your education, your personal background, etc. once. And then you submit it to all the colleges that you apply to through the Common App. And you can apply to up to 20 colleges on the Common App, right? Now, in addition to the core elements of like your educational background and your demographics and your parents, the Common Application actually also shares an essay, right? So there's an essay that the Common App actually has in common, makes sense, across all the schools that you apply to. Now, the Common App essay, as it's sort of called, is often also referred to as the personal statement. And when you hear someone in the college admission space or a college or someone like that talk about your personal statement, most commonly that's going to be a Common Application essay. Right? And the Common App essay is 650 words long. That's the length of the essay that you're required to write. And there are 7 prompts that you're going to be able to respond to. Now, here are those 7 prompts. Prompt number 1 is some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story. Prompt number 2 is the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? Question number 3 is reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking and what was the outcome? Prompt number 4 is describe a problem you've solved or a problem you'd like to solve. It can be an intellectual challenge, a research query, an ethical dilemma, anything that is of personal importance, no matter the scale. Explain its significance to you and what steps you took or could be taken to identify a solution. Prompt number 5 is discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. Prompt number 6 is describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? Prompt number 7 is share an essay on any topic of your choice. It can be one you've already written, one that responds to a different prompt, or one of your own design. Okay. Now, before we dive into how to actually write the Common App essay, we actually have a good starting point for us is going to be talking about why the Common App essay matters in the first place. Why is this essay so important? Well, so first of all, essays themselves matter a lot in the admissions process because they're the main way that an admissions officer gets to know you as a person, right? The rest of your application is mostly stats or facts or accomplishments that are listed on a page. And that gives them a sense of your impressiveness or your accomplishments or your qualifications. But it doesn't really tell them a lot about who you are as a person. Now, at some schools, you're going to get in or get rejected mostly on the basis of your academics, so it's not that important. But at a lot of schools, right, especially those that have competitive or selective admissions processes, right, that personal element is often what's going to be the tiebreaker between two applicants that are pretty similar. There's a lot of really, really talented and qualified applicants to top schools in the United States. So how do you set yourself apart? One of the ways you do that is via the essay. So the essay itself is very, very important. And the Common App essay in particular is important because unlike, say, a supplemental essay that you're writing for one specific college, a Common Application essay is going to be seen by virtually every college that you apply to, whereas the supplemental essays are only seen by one college at a time. So it is the single most impactful essay you will write during the admissions process. Now, if there's one slide that I want you to walk away from this presentation having really sort of internalized and taken away, it's going to be this slide right here. And the key point of this slide is that a great Common App essay is deeply personal, right? The single most important thing that your Common App essay must achieve is winning over the admissions officer on a personal level. You want them to walk away from reading your essay as an advocate for your admission. And your essay needs to reveal things about you that can't just be learned by reading your resume or your transcript. It's much more about who you are than about what you've done. And I'll repeat that. It's much more about who you are than about what you've done, right? The purpose of the Common App essay, right, that you're going for, right? The singular goal that you're going for is for the admissions officer who's reading this to walk away being able to say, A, I know who this person is, and B, I want this person and their personality and their way of thinking about the world to be a part of my college, to be a part of my organization, so to speak, right? So number one thing within this number one slide is it's much more about who you are than what you've done. There's always a temptation to write about your extracurricular accomplishments in your essays, right? It's to say, I became the president, or I became this, or I started this project. And that's all well and good. And those are obviously awesome things that many of you are doing out there, especially amidst a pandemic and the sort of general grappling that this country is doing with sort of racial issues and stuff like that. It's a tough time, obviously. And the environment in which you're operating is obviously one that I don't even know I could have dealt with the kind of stress that you all have to go through. But despite the fact that you have done incredibly sort of interesting and impressive things, right? You still want these essays to be about who you are, not about what you've done. Okay. And to kind of articulate that point a little bit more clearly, you want the readers to feel your emotions as they read the essay and become invested in your positive outcome or journey, right? So if, for example, you're writing an essay about, your journey with tennis or with music or with debate, you want them to be invested in the idea that you are going to be sort of the champion, or you're going to achieve your goal, or you're going to find something out about yourself. Similarly, if you're writing about how you want to tackle world hunger, you want them to root for A, you to solve world hunger, and B, for world hunger to be solved, and for you to be the person to do it, right? So you need the admissions officer to be rooting for you actively by the end of your essay, right? So how do you actually go about creating this personal connection, right? How do you tell someone more about you? And then I think this is the thing that a lot of students really struggle with, is like, how do I actually bring about more of who I am, on the page, right? So in order to create the personal connection, your essay can do some of the following things, right? First, it should explore how you think about the world around you, both as something is happening and then upon further reflection. So what were you thinking about in the moment? Like, how were you processing what's happening in the moment? But then also, how did you process the situation or the event or the tough experience down the line? How did you process it when you thought back about it later on? Point number two is demonstrating your core values. Not just stated, right? Not just saying, I believe in equality, or I believe in sort of freedom, or whatever your core values are. I believe in generosity, but actually showing that through the things that you've done in your essay. And in fact, if you can have someone walk away with what your core values are, and you never explicitly say it, that's actually going to be a super effective essay, because that means you've really communicated through the things that you were doing and writing about in the essay what those core values are, without having to explicitly say, I believe in persuasion, or I believe in free speech, or whatever. Right? Point number three is, how do you respond emotionally to different situations and aspects of your background, both in the moment and over time? So point number one is, how do you think about things? What's going through your head in those moments? Point number three is, how are you feeling in those moments, right? And both of these are both of these are kind of the crux of personal connection, right? For someone to really know who you are, they need to know how you think, but they also need to know how you feel, right? Those are probably the two most important elements. And then they also need to know what matters to you, right? So if you kind of boil this down, it's, how do you think about the world? How do you feel about the world and stuff that's happening to you? How do you think about the world and stuff that's happening to you? And what are your core values? What actually matters to you underneath all of that? Awesome. Now, let's circle back to some of the other hallmarks of a great Common App essay. Beyond that personal connection, the personal element, right? There's a couple other things that really go well with a sort of great Common App essay, right? So a great Common App essay has a couple of hallmarks, right? First of all, it avoids cliched or common topics, right? Now, the way to think about this is that admissions officers read thousands and thousands of essays per cycle, and literally 30, 40, 50 essays per day, Common App essays alone. So if your topic is cliched or common, it's just going to be human nature that they're going to get tired of reading about the same thing. Accordingly, if you're going to write about a common topic, say it's sports or moving between states or something like that, your essay is going to have to be so much stronger to stand out in the admissions process, right? So whereas if your essay topic is much more unique, it's about something that's either unique itself or it's a unique spin on a common topic, that's going to make it easier, right? The standard of success for, say, a sports essay is a lot higher than the standard of success for a say a Peruvian basket weaving essay, right? And the reason for that is pretty simple, right? In the Peruvian basket weaving essay, right, everything that you write about your needle techniques and about your the cultural context in which you're pursuing Peruvian basket weaving. Maybe your mother has Peruvian heritage or something like that, right? All of those things are going to be interesting and novel for the person that's reading the essay. It's going to be the first time they'll have read about any of that stuff. Whereas when they read their 838th essay about basketball in a given admission cycle, right? That's a case where like, there's not going to be a lot of new stuff just in the essay. So you're going to have to really strain and really stand out in terms of your writing quality. And that's a lot harder to execute because you got to be really in the top tier of writing quality to succeed there. Now, in addition to that, obviously, a great Common App essay is well written with strong grammar and high quality writing. In addition to just the quality of the writing, say on a sentence by sentence basis, or even like at the word choice level, you want to make sure that your essay has strong flow and readability. And so what that means is when you actually sit down and read the entire thing from start to finish, is it easy to read, or do you find yourself getting tripped up or, slowed down by the way the essay is configured? So, are the sentences all super long and complex, or are there a mix of short and long sentences? Do you do a good job of avoiding repeating the same word over and over again? Now, if this is something that you find yourself struggling to judge, one way you can do this is by reading your essay out loud. Oftentimes when you read it in your head, things will flow a lot more easily than if you try to read it out loud. Another way you can do this is by getting someone else to read the essay if you can't judge it for yourself. And even if they read it out loud, that might enhance their ability to assess that. Finally, a great Common App essay is going to make use of the full 650 words. And so what do I mean by make use of the full 650 words? First of all, obviously you don't want to go over 650 words. By definition, going over the word count isn't going to fly with the Common App. But you also don't want to be out there writing 600 or 550 words, right? Those extra 100 words are an opportunity for you to add reflection, details, in the moment descriptions that explore these concepts. So if you're writing less than 650 words, chances are you're not doing as much as you could to enhance that personal connection. So, it's not a strict limit that you have to get to exactly 650. But if you're writing, 635 or less, chances are there's an additional sentence or something in there that could be added to improve your essay. And if you're writing like 550, you have a ton of space to add stuff. Now, one final thing to keep in mind with the Common App essay is that you need to think of your Common App essay as part of a broader portfolio of essays, right? So with a given college, right, when they look at your essay, your application, they're going to read your Common Application essay. But in many cases, they're also going to have supplemental essays. And you need to think of these essays as a portfolio and create a comprehensive narrative across these different essays, right? And so how that works is with each essay, you want to try to convey something different about yourself. And also you want to try and keep in mind the other essays you're going to write when you're picking your Common App topic, right? So for example, if you're going to write your Common App about a major or area of interest, right? Sometimes that can be a bad idea, especially, if you're applying to a college that's also going to ask you to write about why you want to study your major. It's not to say that, a major based essay is inherently bad for your Common App. It just means that you're going to have to find something else to write about for your why do you want to study this major essay that the college asks you about. So you just kind of keep that in mind that you want to make sure you think of your essays as a combination or as a portfolio. Now, some general other content guidelines to keep in mind. First up, your essay should be mostly about you as a high schooler. It's okay to reference an event before high school, but you have to bring the essay and the majority of the essay around to who you are today. Similarly, your essay should be about a personal experience, not about other events in the world or history, right? Historical events, right? If you feel a connection to a world event or even to a historical event, you have to bring it back to your personal engagement with that event. It must be about how you relate to the event, right? So I'll give you an example just to use myself, as a sort of example, right? In the early 1900s, there was a massacre by British colonialists in India at a place called Jallianwala Bagh, right? Now, I could write an essay about Jallianwala Bagh, but the way I would do that would have to be about how that event then sort of set up conditions that affect who I am as a person today, right? So Jallianwala Bagh, for example, is one of the elements that created a free India. Right, it was one of the sort of long list of sort of atrocities that led up to India being able to gain its own independence, right? And there's a line you can draw from that to sort of who I am today as a person, right? But the majority of that essay should be about how I was affected by that event, if I'm going to write about that, right? So I might write about sort of the ways in which, right, Indian American culture, for example, didn't allow me to, or didn't not necessarily didn't allow me, but didn't encourage me, for example, to pursue my passion for sports, or affected how I viewed sort of like, the military and violence relative to, say, someone who came from an American background, right? And maybe you go further into like how that affected kind of the choices that I made in my life, right? So there are ways in which you can tie to historical events, but you have to use the historical event as kind of like an incitement into like some future trends or current day situations that affected you, right? And I don't even think that was a great example on my part. I just gave it as an example, right? So that's kind of something to keep in mind, right? Similarly, your essay shouldn't be about your experience with the coronavirus. You can either write about that responding to the COVID prompt or in the additional information section, but you don't want to write your essay about the coronavirus because for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's, by definition, it's an event that's happened to every single kid in the country, more or less. And so your essay about the coronavirus is not going to stand out. It's not going to be unique, right? Additionally, because they give you an explicit place to do that, you're wasting an opportunity to convey something else with your Common App essay. Finally, you want to know your audience, right? We talked a lot earlier about this notion of, sharing your core values. One thing to keep in mind is you also want to make sure that you're sharing core values that line up with the values of the institution that you are applying to, right? So for example, college admissions officers at selective and private colleges tend to be very progressive. So if you're someone who has kind of a mix of conservative and progressive social sort of values or just values in general, you may want to focus more on the values that you hold that are more progressive and highlight those. Whereas if you're purely conservative, you may want to sort of try to appeal only to universal values, right? That, like integrity and sort of kindness and stuff like that's unimpeachable, right? Whereas something like religious sort of tolerance or freedom of speech has to be thought about very carefully and has to be framed in a progressive context, right? For those schools. Then on the other end of the spectrum, there are schools like BYU or Liberty University, where they're very conservative in their culture and their values. So you've got to flip the advice the exact other direction. Now, I will say that more colleges are progressive than are conservative, but there are colleges on both sides of that spectrum. Some other guidelines just to kind of keep in mind. First of all, your essay shouldn't have a title. Second of all, your essay shouldn't use quotes from historical figures or famous people. Generally speaking, it's sort of tacky and it kind of wastes space that you could be using to convey your own sort of thoughts and feelings. Your essay shouldn't have any content that's inappropriate, racist, sexist, or homophobic, just sort of good practice and good hygiene against that. And unless it is in dialogue or used in a very precise way, you should generally avoid slang and dialect. Just because, right, you want your essay to be as readable and as comprehensible as possible to everyone involved. Okay, before we dive into the individual Common App essay prompts, I also want to touch briefly on the 3 basic essay structures. So structure number 1 is a narrative essay, where you tell one story from start to finish. It can be, a story that's told in a moment in time, i.e. like within one day, or in a chronological retelling of a longer narrative. And narratives are usually based around one main theme. Then you have a series of anecdotes or montages. This is a series of disconnected anecdotes or moments in time that reveal multiple themes. I will say that generally speaking, I prefer a narrative, or even like what I would call a compound narrative, where you're sort of covering 2 very close related themes, to the anecdotes or montage, but ultimately it's up to you. You can write an effective montage essay. And then unconventional structures, right? So this is where your essay is kind of transcends the notion of an essay itself, right? So say you write your essay in lines of code or wrote an iambic pentameter. The unique thing about the essay is not so much the structure itself, but it is the way in which you've written the essay. These are sort of decent options as far as structuring your essay, but I will note that unconventional structures do have a higher bar for success.